So, good evening, everyone. On behalf of Tushita Center, Delhi, and Shanti Deva Center, New York, I would like to extend a very warm welcome to Venerable Jetsunma Palmo to our online session this evening. It is a great honor and privilege for us to have Jetsunma's teachings today through her response to the questions raised by several students of Dharma. Jetsunma Palmo was born in 1943 and is a bhikshuni in the Drukpa lineage of the Kagyu school of Tibetan Buddhism. She is an author, teacher, and founder of the Dongyu Gatsoling Nunnery in Himachal Pradesh, India. Jetsunma Palmo is best known for her famous strict meditation retreat. From the age of 33 to 45, Jetsunma Palmo lived for 12 years in a remote Himalayan cave, developing the profound store of wisdom and compassion that is clearly expressed and elucidated in her teachings. In 2008, Tenzin Palmo was honored with the rare title of Jetsunma, which means Venerable Master, by His Holiness Gyalwang Drukpa, in recognition of her efforts in promoting the status of female practitioners in Tibetan Buddhism. Today, we are going to have a question and answer session with Jetsunma Palmo. And now, may I request Nivita to please conduct the program.
Yeah, thank you so much, Dr. Renuka, for introducing us. And yeah, thank you everybody for submitting your questions to us. I'd like to ask our first question for you, Jetsunma. Thank you for joining us. What was your main motivation when you were staying in the cave? And did you have any regrets when you left the cave?
Well, my main motivation was just to find somewhere that was quiet, isolated, and conducive for practice. You've left. Are you still there? Okay. Sorry, our electricity has gone off, so that's why we have this strange lighting at the moment. I mean, I had already been living in India for many years, and I had been living in the Lahul Valley for 6 years before I went into the cave. So I went there just because it was very quiet, it was very isolated. In the winter, once it started snowing in November, it would be impassable until May. So one knew nobody was going to come, nothing was going to interrupt the practice. And that's why I stayed there. Oh, the light's back on. That's why it was a perfect place. Also, Lahul is a Buddhist area. The people there are Tibetan Buddhists. And so one felt very safe, you know, for a woman all alone, you know, there are, you know, problems. But in Lahul, that was not true. The people there were very supportive of the fact someone was up practicing, you know, they were very happy about that. So actually it was an ideal situation, which is why I stayed. And then when I left, I didn't leave with regret, because by that time I'd already been living in India for 24 years. And I felt that I needed to reconnect with Western culture. I had become Buddhist when I was 18, and after that I was only reading Dharma books. But, you know, the West itself has great culture, also great spiritual culture. So therefore, when a friend said, come to Assisi, come to Italy, I felt that's it, the perfect place to connect again with Western culture. So actually, I was very happy.
Wow, thank you. That's incredible and inspiring. Our next question is, our Western mind is so indoctrinated by our way of living. It is deep, deep in our genes. What would be key evidence for a Westerner on their way to enlightenment?
I would say, first of all, forget about enlightenment. Forget about striving for a goal. I mean, this is just the ego with its ambitions, you know, it has ambitions in the world. It also then takes those ambitions into the spiritual realm too. I've got to get enlightened. Am I getting more enlightened? Have people noticed that I'm more spiritual than I used to be? And am I doing it right? Should more be happening? And so on, you know, I mean, the fact is that, you know, this just becomes another ego play. So I would say, all right, well, just use your daily life as your practice. Have some formal practice, but keep it simple. Don't get too ambitious. Cultivate loving awareness during the day as much as possible. And use your day for cultivating the paramita, especially ethics, patience, generosity. Just try to be nicer, you know, I mean, and don't worry about enlightenment. It's, you know, cultivate your inner awareness, begin to understand the mind, look at the mind, cultivate being present. That's more than enough, you know. I mean, if you're walking on the path, don't worry about where you're going to. Just look at, you know, the scenery around you while you're passing by. That's enough, honestly and truthfully, you know. Read some good Dharma books to inspire and try to really understand what the Dharma is about. But, you know, don't keep it up in the head. Put it down into the heart. And then, you know, slowly, slowly, we begin to see something inside is changing. Circumstances and people who normally would really annoy and irritate us, suddenly they don't. And so like this, you know, slowly, slowly, we just, you know, things develop of themselves. I've lost you. Have you lost me?
I'm here.
Here we are.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
again.
Can you hear me?
I can hear you. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. So, yeah, thank you. And related to that, another question we received was, if you have very little time, is it better to study or to practice?
Well, to study is always good. Can you hear me?
Yes, can hear you loud and clear. Yeah.
As long as you hear me, it doesn't matter if you see me.
Yes.
Okay, so it's very good to study, to at least to begin to understand what is the way the Dharma view, you know, how we see things. But beyond that, what has to transform is the heart mind. This is the really important thing. Otherwise, we just gather more and more and more information. We get ever so clever at being able to, you know, dissect and analyze and so forth. But inside, nothing really is changing much. It's still the same old me, right? So, so I think it's important that, you know, we keep it simple and keep our practice going, you know, and using everything that we encounter as the practice so that something inside changes. Because otherwise our head gets bigger, 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 but our heart gets smaller, smaller, smaller. And that's out of balance. So on the whole, if you have to do one or the other, try to do a bit of both, study and practice. But if it's really an either or, then definitely, you know, practice is where it's at. I mean, in the time of the Buddha, they weren't carting heavy books around with them, you know, and they didn't even have books. But they did have practice.
Thank you. Thank you. We received quite a few questions about various emotions and how to deal with them. So one that we got was, if you are not able to perform in life, then how can you save yourself from feeling guilt and shame?
You know, I'm wondering about that question. Perform what? If you're not able to perform, you know, you're not a monkey. Well, we all have monkey mind, but I mean, perform what? I mean, anybody can try to be more kind, more generous, more patient. We can try to be more mindful, more aware. You know, what do you want? You know, and even if we fail, you know, somebody annoys us and we get all mad again, doesn't matter. We try again. I mean, the important thing to understand is that all of us have faults. All of us have negative emotions. Who doesn't? You know, that's why we need the Dharma. If we were so perfect, we wouldn't need the Dharma. You know, I mean, the Dharma is only for us klaks who need help, right? In how to transform our kleshas, our negative emotions into positive emotions. So, you know, the whole point of the path is to recognize our problems and then work to transform those problems into opportunities for practice. So, you know, it's not about performing. It's about looking in our mind, seeing where the obstacles and where the glitches are, and then understanding how to work with that and use that as a path. All Buddhist schools, from the time of the Buddha onwards. Oh, I think you've lost your light.
Yeah, I think we lost our light. That's okay. I'm still here.
So, I mean, all Buddhist schools are dealing with how to work with negative emotions and to use these emotions in a skillful way to transform ourselves and in this way move on the path. You know, it's not directed at people who are already perfect and don't have any negative emotions. It's directed at all of us who are struggling with one thing or another. Well, this is the practice. So, you know, it's not about not being able to perform. I mean, everything is, you know, a way of helping us to use everyday circumstances as the path. I mean, it's very important to recognize that. It's not starting from up here, you know, but from where we are right here now, how to deal with that. So it's good.
Yeah. Also, what about anxious thinking, Jetsunma? And this is a question that I also am very curious about, because I think in today's society, many of us experience anxiety and anxious thoughts with so much stimuli in the world. So how can we deal with that?
Well, first thing is to look at it. You know, I mean, if we have thoughts of anxiety or thoughts of anything, to look straight at those thoughts, right? And especially anxiety. Anxiety is mostly based on the future. You know, right now you're okay, but maybe tomorrow or the day, or next week, next year, you know, it's always going to happen, but it's not what's actually happening right now, because whatever is happening right now, you're dealing with it right now. You don't have time for anxiety. So the thing is that, you know, we should look at all our thoughts, including anxious thoughts, with kindness, with loving compassion, seeing our thoughts and saying, what's your problem thoughts? You know, what's happening here? Why do you feel like this? And if we look straight at the thoughts, we see that they're just really just bubbles. They're not something solid. They're not something real. They're just projections of our mental energy. And we are not the thoughts. This is the point. They're just thoughts. They're not reality. They're not what's happening. They're just thoughts. If we look at the thoughts, we see those thoughts in their very nature, like bubbles, are empty. So why are we expending so much energy on something which hasn't even happened yet? You know, but to look at that with not trying to suppress the anxiety, not trying to get rid of it, but really looking at it with kindness, but realizing that it's all just the fantasy of the mind, and we shouldn't believe everything we think, right? I mean, we are dominated. One of our problems is that we are so dominated by our thinking, and we believe our thinking, and we identify with our thinking. So a very important Buddhist practice, maybe the most important Buddhist practice, is to observe the mind.
Mm.
Whether the thoughts are happy thoughts or sad thoughts, they're just thoughts.
Yeah. So we received a long one, so I'm going to read it out loud. Dear Jetsunma, thank you for your kindness. We often find ourselves in situations when difficult people are around us who intentionally create problems for us. As Dharma practitioners, it is expected to contemplate on impermanence and also have loving kindness and compassion, even for our enemies who create difficult circumstances for us. But at the same time, if we become too tolerant of their behaviors, they might continue harming us and may even have such intentions against others. How, as Dharma practitioners, should we deal with such people? And especially, how do we become assertive enough from the perspective of Dharma so that they do not harm us or others anymore? Quite a long question, but very important.
Well, it's an important question, because, of course, especially in the Lojong, in the mind training, it's all about, and in Shantideva, patience, 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 and you know, forgiving everybody, and it sounds very idealistic, but of course we should develop more patience and more compassion in difficult situations with difficult people, no doubt. You know, it's no good getting upset and angry every time somebody does something we don't like, you know, but it doesn't mean that therefore we become doormats, that everybody can just wipe their feet on us and kick us around. It's, if someone is consistently difficult, if they are very abusive, or if they're corrupt and cheating us, or anything which they are doing consistently, then one should stand up to them. One should stand up, but with compassion and not anger, right? This is the point, not with the desire to retaliate, but because we see that these people, if we always allow these people to get away with things consistently, then they will just make bad karma. And also they will cause more trouble, maybe to many others. So out of compassion, we should stand up to them. Compassion isn't always, people have the idea that compassion is weak. Actually, compassion is very, very strong, and it's not always peaceful. If one thinks of the Bodhisattva of compassion in Buddhism, Avalokiteshvara or Chenrezig, then he's shown white and sitting on a lotus and smiling and holding a lotus and a mala, and very sweet. And this is how people think, oh, compassion, compassion, oh, so sweet. But the other aspect of Avalokiteshvara is Mahakala. Mahakala is the great black one. He is a chief of all the protectors, and very, very wrathful. He's black, you know. You don't mess around with Mahakala. But he is the flip side of Chenrezig, of Avalokiteshvara, right? So this is very important to remember. Sometimes his wrathful flames out and so forth, and his teeth, it's not based on anger. It's based on seeing with great wisdom and insight the situation and how the perpetrator is harming themselves as well as oneself. And in that way, great compassion creates this enormous strength. I mean, it's not weak at all. And patience also is not weak. Being angry every time someone annoys you is weak, right? But sometimes you have to say, stop. Why? Because you see the situation is not good. It's not good for oneself, but it's also not good for the other. And so you have to stand up for what is wrong. You know, it's not about being complicit with something which is wrong or condoning what is something wrong. Just because you might have compassion for their stupidity doesn't mean that therefore you condone it. Just as a parent bringing up a child, I mean, there are times when the parent has to appear wrathful if she sees a child is doing something which will ultimately cause harm to the child because the child is ignorant, she doesn't understand. So in this way, I mean, yes, compassion certainly, but compassion also has its very strong side to it. It's not just giving in to everything with a smile. If you're in an abusive situation, stop it. You know, I mean, if you have to leave, you leave, or else you stop it right there. Because bullying doesn't help anybody, right? Least of all the bully. So be sensible. I mean, we have to use our intelligence, and compassion is conjoined with wisdom, you know, which means seeing the situation very clearly and how it's best to respond in that situation. So you can be tough. I mean, even Tara, who again is very sweet and smiling and holding a lotus, she has 21 aspects, and several of those aspects are quite wrathful. You wouldn't want to mess around with Tara. And she represents fearless compassion, right? She's very fearless.
Thank you, Jetsunma. And a related question is, how can we cultivate forgiveness?
How can we cultivate forgiveness? Well, you know, honestly and truthfully, by realizing that those who harm others are themselves deluded, you know, and they're overcome by poisonous mind states. This is why they do things which are bad and harmful. Otherwise, if they had more intelligence, they wouldn't do that. Genuine wisdom, intelligence, not just, you know, stupid intelligence. Isn't that sad? I mean, would we want a mind which did those things which that person has done? You know, really and truly, you know. So therefore, harboring revenge or ill will really just hurts us more than it hurts them. It doesn't hurt them. I mean, we sit there feeling angry and upset and hurt and revolving in our mind all the wrong that's been done to us, and we feel totally miserable. They're fine. You know, we do to ourselves what only our worst enemies would do for us. And this is true, you know, just, so why cause ourselves more suffering? I mean, karma will take care of them in time. If you're not in this lifetime, then in future lifetimes. And so, you know, why not just let it go? It's like carrying a heavy backpack up a mountain, you know, full of rocks. We're just so tired of it all. Just drop it. I mean, we in past lives have done bad things to others. In this lifetime, maybe people are doing bad things to us. So what? You know, we can practice loving compassion, breathing in their negativity, breathing out our positivity. Why not change the scenario? That's, I mean, you know, really and truly, what's the point? I mean, I have met people who are so angry about something that somebody did for them, like cheated them out of something, and like it was yesterday, but in fact, it was 30 years ago. But they're still carrying it with them. You know, I mean, this is very, very, you know, what's the point? So send them love and compassion. Say, okay, fine, you know, let it be as it was, but it doesn't really matter. And just go on. You know, I mean, I'm just thinking, suddenly come in my mind, when I was a child in London, then my father had a shop, a fish shop. And then when he died, my mother took it over and she employed his brother, my uncle, to be the one to actually run the shop. She was in the background doing all the other work that needs to do if you've got fish. But he was the one that went to the fish market and bought the fish, came back and was mostly doing all the sales. But one time, and we didn't get much money from it, even though at that time we had lots of customers, but still there was very little coming in, very, very little. And my uncle said, well, it's very difficult, you know, prices are, inflation is rising, etc., etc. And then one time my uncle was sick and my mother went to the fish market. She had to buy the fish instead of my uncle. And when she got there, she discovered they would not sell her any fish because they said we owed them £2,000. And in those days, £2,000 was an enormous amount. And my mother was in shock. And it turned out that my uncle was a gambler and had been using all the money for the horses. And which is why we got such a small amount every week, because he was giving the minimum he could so that he could spend the rest on the horses. He wasn't buying the fish anymore. We were in incredible debt with the fish market and so forth. So by rights, my mother should have hated him. You know, not only was he depriving her, but he also was depriving her children, right? But she just felt sorry for him. You know, he was obviously caught in this gambler's mindset. And although she didn't, you know, again, condone what he did, she just said, well, that's it. You have to pay the debt. It's not our debt, it's your debt. However you want to do it, you do it. And that's it. Thank you very much. And she never talked about it. She never ruminated over it. I still went to see his wife every week, and my mother just accepted that that was the situation. He had been caught in this trap of his own mental delusion. What to do? And she let it go. So she didn't carry it with her as a burden of resentment for the rest of her life. In fact, she never mentioned it again. So we can do that. Why carry the burden which harms us? You know, which people do all the time, and they suffer. We're not really very intelligent as human beings.
Thank you. So
Let it go. Say, okay, this happened. Obviously, some karmic conditioning there. Who knows what I did to you in my last life? Let's finish it now, so we don't go on into the next life and the next life and the next life. Right now, I let it go, and therefore, that's it. We don't need to keep playing this game over and over.
yeah, thank you. Thank you. This is an interesting question. How, why, and what is the manner in which extreme laziness and inaction come into being for a being, and what can be done to tackle it if one's willpower isn't strong enough?
Say that one again. Oh, this is the one about laziness, right?
Yeah. Laziness and inaction, yeah.
Okay, we're in a different order here. We have to find it. What were they saying about laziness? Well, you know, I mean, basically, I mean, who knows what causes laziness? Usually it's because we have lost interest. If we have enthusiasm, then we are not lazy. We do things which we enjoy doing. So therefore, if we no longer have any desire to do something and we are procrastinating or just not bothering, it's because we are not interested in doing that, you know. So in order to jumpstart the vehicle, we can take some small steps, you know. For example, if the disinterest, the laziness is to do with one's practice, you know, then we could have just 5 minutes of practice. You know, don't sit there saying, oh, I should do 2 hours every day, because then you're not going to do. But if you say, right, I'm going to get up and I'm going to sit for 5 minutes, you know, anybody can sit for 5 minutes, right? And then if 5 minutes becomes a habit, you can do 10 minutes. And then gradually, you know, gradually work it out. Set yourself small tasks, right? Just as something simple, small, that you can achieve. That's the point, you know. And then, because laziness is indeed a big obstacle on the Dharma path, or any path in the world even, you know. And enthusiastic energy, virya, is one of the paramita. So if we want to accomplish anything, we have to have virya, we have to have this effort, but we're not going to have any effort if we're not enthusiastic about it. You know, so I mean, that's the thing, is why are we lazy? You know, is it because you don't want to do it? You know, so what about eating? What about watching television? What about playing with your computer or your mobile phone? You know, I mean, are you too tired to breathe? Right? I mean, the thing is to ask yourselves, are you really, really lazy about everything, or just about those things which actually you don't want to do, right? Because nothing will ever be accomplished without making some effort. And so stop indulging, right? I mean, you know, get to the point where we say, that's enough. Now sit up and get your life together and stop playing around. But you have to do that with something which you care about, you know, because if you don't really care, then you won't get the enthusiasm to make an effort. So I would start by questioning, what is it why do I not have any interest? And how to deal with that. Because that's the fundamental point, that somehow or other there is a lack of enthusiasm. You know, there's not something you can just plug in and zap, you're full of energy. But, you know, you can explore. Were you always lazy? Is this something which has grown? Is there anything which you do with enthusiasm, which you enjoy doing? Because if we enjoy doing something, then it's easy. Even if outwardly it looks like it's hard work. If you enjoy it, then it's not hard work. So this is the point, to find out why there is this lack of enthusiasm and enjoyment. And is there anything which you really enjoy doing? I mean, you know, which is virtuous, obviously, but, you know, something that you can enjoy doing, and then use that as, you know, to go forward. mean, mostly people procrastinate about things which they don't want to do. If you want to do it, you don't procrastinate.
That's really good advice.
I speak totally from experience.
Mhm. Thank you. So this is a question about the Goenka style of meditation vipassana. Was the Goenka style of vipassana technique of scanning for body sensations taught by the Buddha? And can one reach the first stage of enlightenment by practicing only this technique?
Okay, so yes.
6.
So mindfulness of the sensations is one which is taught in the Goenka system, is one of the 4 applications of mindfulness. The first is the body, the postures, walking, standing, sitting, lying down, and the breath. That's all the body consciousness. So this is normally done first, especially the meditation on the breath or walking meditation, right? Which is very popular, especially in Southeast Asia. And that definitely comes from the Buddha. So there's first is the mindfulness of the body, including breathing. Then mindfulness of the sensations, which is the Goenka system, sort of. Then mindfulness of the mind, watching the thoughts, which is more emphasized in the Buddhist tradition of Tibet. There's a lot of, especially Mahamudra, there's a lot of looking at the mind. And then dharmas, which is either meaning the mental categories or external phenomena, depending on whether it's Theravada or Mahayana interpretation, but it's called mindfulness of dharmas. So therefore, yeah, you know, it's Goenka's method cultivates calm, shamatha, a kind of shamatha. You know, you're watching the sensations, which is shamatha. And that can deepen into insight, into, you know, what's going on inside, which is vipassana. So, you know, basically there's no reason why it should not lead to the stages of liberation. Why not? The important thing to remember is it's not the only way, right? This is the problem with the Goenka, is that he makes it as if that's the only way, but of course it's not. And even in the Theravada, what to speak of everybody else, even in the Theravada, there are so many different approaches. Even in the Satipatthana Sutra, the Mahasatipatthana Sutra of the Buddha, so many different kinds of approaches to your focus of attention. And the idea being that you find the one which suits you best. But I mean, even in the time of the Buddha, there were many different approaches and many different teachers teaching different methods. And none of them are bad or good. They're all perfectly valid. It just depends on, you know, what is helpful for yourself. So it gets, the only problem is when it gets very narrow and they say this is the only way, because even in the Buddha Sutras, you can see it's not the only way, it's one way. It's a good way, but it's not by any means exclusive. So this is the only problem. Other than that, no, it's a good technique and it gets people sitting. And even here at our nunnery, we, for 2 years running, we had very nice ladies coming from Pune, who were Vipassana instructors in Pune, who came to the nunnery to teach the nuns. And so for 2 years, they did these 10-day retreats and they found it very helpful. A lot of them really got a lot out of it, you know, so it's not that it's a bad system by any means. It's just not the only system.
Thank you. So we had another question, which I'll read out loud. Jetsunma, His Holiness the Dalai Lama always stresses on hope. My question is, can one have hope without expectation? When one is hopeful, isn't the arising of expectation a byproduct?
Yes, the problem with hope is that it's conjoined with fear. I mean, hope and fear are two sides of the same coin, really. So, fear or anxiety is the other side of too much hope and expectation. So what we need to know is, to my mind, I'm not saying anything against His Holiness, who is always very positive, is we can cultivate the mind that knows that whatever is going to happen, we can deal with it, right? That sense of inner confidence, you could say, rather than hope, that inner confidence. So if we are balanced, aware, present in the moment, right now, in the present, then we can be optimistic that whatever comes next, we can cope with it and take it onto the path. And in that way, we have the inner confidence that we can deal with whatever comes up. That I would say, yes, definitely. That's what we need to do. And so we take it step by step. Right now, in the present, how we're dealing with the present skillfully, then we can have that inner certainty of dealing with whatever turns up in the future with equal confidence and skill. So we work now. This is the point. We work now. If we can deal with what's happening now, then we can have the confidence we can also deal with what's going to happen in the future. Who knows what? And that takes us beyond hope and fear, because we don't have to hope that things are going to go right, fear things are not going to go right, because whatever happens, we'll deal with it. We can cope. That's very liberating, actually.
Yeah, thank you. I'll ask one last question from the submission. So we have a little bit of time for the wonderful questions coming in the chat also from people who have joined here. So the last question I will ask is, what should we practice in order to meet the Dharma in future lives, and that too at an early age?
Well, we should make prayers of aspiration, that to be reborn near to the Dharma and to have faith in the Dharma, because it's not just enough to be born in a Buddhist country. You or to meet with Buddhist teachers or whatever. If we don't have that faith, that spontaneous desire to learn and to practice, then it doesn't matter that we're born, surrounded by great teachers. So what? We won't be interested. We have to have that interest, So we should make the prayer that we should meet with the Dharma very, very early, that we should have faith in the Dharma, that we should meet with good teachers, and that the opportunities should be there for us to study and practice. I mean, I was reminded of, we keep getting these batches of little girls coming from Zanskar in Ladakh, and some of them are very small. The last lot, one of them was 3, and another one was 4. And we didn't want them. We were told they were teenagers, but when they turned out, they were little tots. But they are just so enthusiastic. They just are so happy. And they are learning so quickly. And they just feel so much joy. And what interested me was that I thought, especially from the West, that people would be very horrified to hear that such small children were coming to us. But most people were writing and saying, I'm also praying that in my next lifetime, I can be like these little ones and meet with the Dharma so early and not waste my life. But I should make that connection right away and come to your nunnery. So yes, like that, we have to make that aspiration very clear in our mind that we want to meet with the Dharma as soon as possible and have all the causes and conditions for us to study and practice. Then, and if we make good karma, insofar as, we are, reasonably okay kind of people, there's no reason why the aspirations will not be fulfilled.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Jetsunma. Those are the questions. Unfortunately, we couldn't ask all the questions that were submitted, and because we do want to get to some questions that have been submitted in the chat. So one question we have just received was asking you to comment briefly on the present state of efforts to make full ordination for women more available.
Well, I mean, it has been a very interesting journey, because when I first came to India and to the Tibetan scene here, the refugee scene, nuns were very uneducated. They were very overlooked. There were almost no nunneries. And while the lamas were building up their monasteries again, the nuns were very much in the background and neglected. Then at a certain point, for certain reasons, it was understood that actually it would be a good idea to educate nuns in the way that the monks are being educated. After all, they're totally intelligent. And so then came the beginning of educating the nuns, founding really nice nunneries for them, taking care of them, recognizing they were really also equally important. And what happened was that the monks became so enthusiastic to teach the nuns. They loved teaching the nuns, they loved training them, they were the ones encouraging them to go forward, like for the Geshe-ma degree and for the Kenmos. And they have always been very, very supportive of the way the nuns are coming up. And so that's wonderful. But when it comes to higher ordination for the nuns, which after all was given by the Buddha himself, he always wanted a fourfold Sangha, meaning fully ordained monks, fully ordained nuns, lay men, lay women. Right from the beginning, after his enlightenment, he said that his aim was to cultivate the fourfold Sangha. So right from the beginning, he really did want nuns. And even in the earlier sutras, he was very, very encouraging to the nuns. In the Therigatha, for example, we can see how extremely helpful and appreciative he was of his nuns. But when it comes now to full ordination for nuns, it's like hitting a stone wall. I mean, it's very interesting because, of course, there are tens of thousands of fully ordained nuns in the world. It's not that there are unknown fully ordained nuns in the world. I mean, China, Taiwan, Korea, Vietnam has had fully ordained nuns since forever, and 10 times more nuns than there are monks. Fully ordained nuns, very highly educated, running even hospitals and schools and colleges and orphanages, old age people's homes, and also, very, very prominent in the Dharma world in which they are. And even in the Theravadan world now, nuns, fully ordained nuns are coming up. Now there are 1,000 at least bhikkhunis in Sri Lanka, and also hundreds now in Thailand. But the Tibetans are so reluctant. It's very interesting. They have been examining this situation for 30 years and they still haven't come to any decision. But it's going to happen, and I think it was going to happen very soon. So we don't give up hope. The nuns now themselves are very educated. This is the other thing. It's really true that if they had become bhikkhunis, the Tibetan nuns 20 years ago, 30 years ago, they were totally not ready because they were uneducated. They lived in very poor circumstances. They were very shy, very reticent. They would have been a disaster. But now they are highly educated, very articulate, much more confident. They would be able to study Vinaya. They would be able to keep all the rules very, very carefully. They live in very nice nunneries now. Now is the time. Now is the time. So we can be grateful for the reluctance in the past, because this is the time now.
Thank you. I'd like to ask you one more question that we got in the chat, and I'm so sorry we can't get to all these questions. Hopefully we can, Jetsunma would grace us with her presence for another Q&A in the future. But the last question I will ask you today is how to deal with a partner who is often angry, volatile, self-centered, and has trouble finding, has fault-finding attitude, but overall is loving towards you. How to deal with the partner and your own self in such situations?
Well, you know, I mean, if it's not too bad, you know, I mean, we all have faults and we can't expect for perfection. So maybe they are your teacher of patience. You know, I mean, I'm not talking about people in abusive situations, not just physically abusive, but psychologically abusive. Get away. You don't need to live with a bully. But if it's not that, if it's just that he's annoying and frustrating and you get fed up sometimes, it doesn't matter. You know, you can use that as learning a good sense of humor to, you know, look at, really, come on, right? You know. And, you know, learning more tolerance, more forbearance, and more kindness. Because often when people get angry or upset or do bad things, it's because inside they're not at peace, right? Why do people do bad things? It's because they have problems inside. And so therefore it's also good to think about that, you know, and therefore to develop loving kindness and compassion and all these practices. As I say, that doesn't mean that if they overstep the line that you should tolerate that. But if it's just that they're kind of annoying, then you just have to laugh and say, well, it could be worse. I mean, look at some of the husbands that you hear about, you know, it's not so bad. And do I really just need Mr. Perfection? You know, where are you going to find him?
Yeah, thank you. Thank you so much, Jetsunma, for your time today. And thank you everybody who's joined us today. I'll just hand it over to Renuka ji, our director of the center, if she'd like to say any final words.
Thank you, my dear. Thank you very much. It's lovely to see you. Actually, to see you, my dear. It's very nice.
Yes, and we actually had another question in the chat, if your nunnery is open for a stay or retreat yet.
Well, at the moment, everybody's doing Nyungne, this, purification ritual. But that finishes at the end of the week. And then after that, we're more or less open, yes. I mean, we've been in very strict retreat for 2 years, and the nuns have been very good about not going out and us not receiving visitors. And it's created it's very interesting in that it's created a very harmonious Sangha. The nuns really enjoyed being enclosed like a cloistered nunnery. They really liked it, and they're so happy. But they recognize that now it's time to open up again. And so yes, so now we are, by next week, we'll be open for visitors. But please let us know if you're coming so that we can be ready.
So I would really like to thank Jetsunma from the bottom of my heart for accepting to do this Q&A session for Tushita, Delhi, and Shantideva Center, New York. I still remember when I received you at the station in Italy, and we had a wonderful session over there. The hall was packed. You cannot imagine. It was so inspiring. And you always inspire us, and you've given us very practical advice today. So we will try to maybe bring it in our lives as much as we can, maybe a fraction of it.
Yeah, you can do it.
Okay,
You're
thank you
already
so
doing
much.
it.
Thank you so much. We'll have you
Thank
at
you.
the center very soon.
Take care, my dear. Thank everybody who's
Thank
put
you.
this together. Thank you all. Thank you.
Thank you.